will preface this specific account by stating that I am a professional wildlife biologist. I have spent the better part of 20 consecutive years conducting intensive, remote field research across various sectors of the Appalachian chain. My entire professional career is rooted in the habit of meticulous, unbiased observation. My job is to record environmental data precisely as it presents itself, completely devoid of emotional projection, embellishment, or narrative spin. I am trained to view the wilderness through a lens of strict scientific skepticism. And that is exactly how I handled the night in question. What I recorded was not a trick of the light or a product of fatigue. It was a physical, measurable sequence of events. I was conducting a nocturnal field survey for a highly specialized, endangered species of mountain salamander. These specific amphibians are profoundly sensitive to artificial light, meaning the fieldwork must be executed in near total darkness, utilizing a low-intensity red wavelength headlamp only. The work is tedious and slow. You must move with extreme deliberation through remote seeps, bogs, and wet weather streams, documenting the exact location and count of each specimen. It is solitary work, and I had performed this exact protocol hundreds of times across my career without incident. This particular survey was taking place in a remote sector of western North Carolina during the late days of April. At that elevation, the forest canopy was still largely bare from the winter freeze, though the thick understory vegetation was just beginning to emerge. I had been out for roughly 2 hours, working a steady transect line along a steep, muddy seep slope, when I suddenly heard a distinct sound echoing from the high ridge crest directly above me. It was not a deer, and it was not a black bear. I feel compelled to pause and emphasize why I am so adamantly disqualifying those two species. When a civilian hears a noise in the woods at night, their mind immediately defaults to the largest known local mammal. I am not a civilian. I have spent 2 decades living and working in these specific forests after midnight. I have accidentally flushed white-tailed deer from their bedding areas from a distance of 20 feet. I am intimately familiar with the loud blowing sound they make and the chaotic, crashing manner in which their hooves strike the brush. I have had adult black bears wander directly through my research transects in the dark. I know exactly how their immense weight distributes over the forest floor, and how their forepaws compressed dead leaves differently than a biped. The auditory data I collected that night was definitively bipedal. It was the unmistakable sound of 2 distinct feet, alternating in a steady, heavy, upright stride along the ridge line above me. The weight behind the footfalls was immense, far too heavy to be a human of average build, yet perfectly balanced on 2 points. The pace of the stride was highly unusual. It was moving significantly slower than an animal attempting to flee, yet far too deliberate and rapid to be a creature merely foraging or wandering aimlessly. It was moving along a parallel trajectory to my own path, tracking my progress from the high ground. I stopped dead in my tracks, reached up, and completely extinguished my red headlamp. I stood frozen in the pitch black, tilting my head to listen. The moment I stopped moving, the entity on the ridge stopped as well. That was the exact moment that a cold spike of professional alarm hit me. In behavioral biology, a wild animal that detects an unknown sound or presence will typically react in one of 2 ways. It will either freeze instantly out of fear, or it will bolt away to safety. It does not synchronize its movement perfectly with yours. This entity halted its stride within 2 seconds of my own cessation. It was the exact behavioral reaction of a human tracker, stopping to eliminate their own footfalls so they can listen to determine the precise position of their target. I stood completely motionless for 5 agonizing minutes, surrounded by the absolute blackness of the seep. The entity above remained entirely silent. Deciding to test the variable, I took exactly 3 deliberate steps forward. Immediately, the entity above took a corresponding sequence of heavy, bipedal steps. It did not take 3 steps, it took 4, but it was a direct, immediate behavioral response to my physical movement. I stopped again. It stopped again. As a scientist, I needed to eliminate coincidence. I repeated this experimentation multiple times, varying my pacing, the duration of my pauses, and the length of my strides. The data was completely uniform. Every single time I initiated movement, the entity mirrored it from the high ground. Every time I froze, it froze. It was actively, deliberately tracking my position through the dark. There was no aggression in the movement, no sudden charge, no descending rush, but it maintained a fixed, parallel distance, monitoring my presence across the slope. Recognizing that my safety was compromised, I made the calculated decision to abort the survey and return to my field vehicle. I did not panic or break into a run. Running in a dark, vertical wilderness is a guaranteed way to break a limb. I maintained a steady, brisk walking pace heading toward the valley floor. The entity above maintained an identical pace, shadowing me through the trees for 20 continuous minutes. It followed me through the thicket until the exact moment my boots stepped off the dirt slope and onto the hard gravel of the Forest Service road. The very instant my feet touched that gravel, the footsteps on the ridge ceased entirely. I stood at the edge of the dark road, safely illuminated by the open door of my truck, and I simply listened for an additional 10 minutes. I wanted a clean, definitive endpoint to the observation. What occurred next was perhaps the most fascinating detail of the entire night. The moment I stepped onto the road, the oppressive tension in the air evaporated, and the ridgeline immediately returned to a normal, healthy forest ecosystem. I could hear the natural croaking of wood frogs in the bog, the rhythmic chirping of insects, and the light, chaotic scuffling of small, actual rodents going about their nocturnal lives. I was hit with a profound, distinct realization. Whatever had been tracking me from the high ridge had simply returned to its own business. The shadowing had not been a predatory hunt. It had been a deliberate, territorial monitoring process. The gravel road represented a definitive boundary line, the exact threshold where its jurisdiction ended and the human world began. It had escorted me to the very edge of its domain to ensure I vacated the premises, and once I crossed that line, its responsibility was fulfilled. I have shared this experience with exactly 2 trusted colleagues, both of whom are veteran field biologists with decades of wilderness experience. Neither of them offered a single note of scientific skepticism. Both of them listened with deep, somber expressions, followed by a long, heavy silence. They both admitted that they had experienced the exact same synchronized tracking phenomenon while working remote ridges at night, once or twice in their careers. And they had both executed the exact same protocol, keeping their heads down, maintaining a steady pace, and walking directly back to the road. Whatever occupies those high, unsurveyed ridges at night is not a mindless beast. It understands boundaries, it understands territory, and it watches us far more closely than we watch it.